Hi, you guys. How you doing? This is Richard Sachs. I'm your host on Lost Arts Radio, and nice to be with you again. I wonder how your weekend's going, and hopefully everything's good for you. I was wondering what to do for today's show, and looking back till, at the time that we started this Lost Arts Radio live show, which is a while ago now. We've been on the air for a number of years, and originally we were thinking of doing a news summary show, but there's so much happening, and it's so well covered by other people, many of whom I can't mention by name now, or we'd be banned the first day. But it's not really our function to do what they're already doing much better. So I would refer you to them, but most of them we can't mention, of course, except by first names that hopefully you would recognize. And I was thinking, all right, well, what can we give you the most value that is not a comprehensive news show, because that's something that takes all week full time. And it really is what's behind the scenes and the meaning and implications of what's going on in the world and what the future holds, extrapolated from what's going on in present situations. And I was looking at the major world developments today, and for some reason felt like it's almost like I'm coming to you from back when I was a university student 50 years ago in the 1960s. And at that time, universities weren't nearly as crazy as they are now, in general, with some exceptions. And we would sit out at night under the stars, and the professors would come out and talk to us like normal people. And it was great. And we would, I remember one night when we watched a movie together in this big hall in the school called War Games. And it wasn't the one with Matthew Broderick. That's also a great movie, I think. But it was a black and white old movie about the U.S. and the Soviet Union having a nuclear war. It was a pretty serious movie, to the point where none of us could sleep that night. We stayed up talking about, what are all the things that look like they're leading toward that. We didn't really have a very deep understanding at the time, but we and the professors would sit out there and think, obviously the question is, what do you do to avert that future so it doesn't happen? And it's not just nuclear war itself, it's the outcome of events that have been going on for a long time. And in fact, they were set in motion at least many thousands of years ago, before our recorded history started, which is really very recent. I'm thinking 15,000 years or so, but probably a lot longer than that. So rather than covering details of news, which the independent news sources that I mentioned are really doing a great job, programs from actual journalists, a lot of them are working on their own and just going out with a camera and saying, look, this is what's happening. We're not twisting it for you or anything. Just want you to see. The best one that I stay in touch with pretty much every day and have for 20 years is another one that I can't mention. It's we have a link to Brighteon channel for it on lostartsradio.com, and you can find it there. The guy's first name that has that channel is Ron, and his last name is Gibson, and you can find it there. It takes you right to it. There are good platforms like Brighteon.com and others that are going to be starting soon. Our channel, we're established on Brighteon.com with Lost Arts Radio now. It's Brighteon.com/channel/Lost Arts Radio. And all kinds of good independent news programs are posted there every day. And some junk ones too, but that's the price you pay for having freedom of speech for all these guys, which is well worth it. So we're trying to stay on the major platforms too as much as we possibly can and not get kicked off right away. But make sure you go now before you forget to lostartsradio.com. Get on our mailing list, because even though we're not really using it for anything, we're not doing a written newsletter at this point. If we suddenly disappear off these platforms, which is possible at any moment, and we've got you on the mailing list, we can embed videos or do something to get information to you if it's important, and it would be nice to have you on that list if you want to. So I guess that message is watch and listen to the brave independent journalist Luke, who's one of the guys that you probably know about, is posted a great video this morning about what's going on in Hong Kong, and we'll mention that in a minute as well. He's on Brighteon and other non-censoring platforms too. And a lot of those guys are already removed from all the major social media platforms. And I noticed that the lady who's in charge of YouTube, I think it's YouTube, yeah, she just came out and said, we don't censor anybody. All the people who think they're censored should come back immediately and find out that it's not true. And so I know of people who went back taking her at her word, and they were immediately censored. So it's just a show to try not to get in trouble with Congress, most likely. But for a few minutes on this show today, and this may seem a bit out of the box to some of you guys, but you already know we have that tendency. I want to share with you an observation of what's actually behind the details of the big news stories that you hear the honest journalists reporting. And there's a theme behind most of them that really should be obvious, but we usually get focused on the details, kind of like missing the forest for the trees, right? And the actual situation behind the details is that humanity is pretty much a totally captured species right now. It's like, what I'm trying to convey is it's like some great conscious beings, in other words, us in our non-degenerated state, very free, based in love and wisdom and harmony, unlimited, capable of manifesting pretty much anything we want to do in the physical world that we want, wandered into some enchanted dark fog or something like that and started living and feeling like we were these little limited, helpless, twisted, vicious, fear-based creatures, using our own unlimited creative ability to manifest this not very nice situation. Some people might call it hell on earth, and I think they would be reasonable. Kind of mystified by why life had become so hard, and some of us playing the parts of victims, enslaved and tortured in a lot of different ways, and often killed by the rulers. In fact, there's that study that I've mentioned a few times by the University of Hawaii. I think the guy's name is Hummel, Hummel. It's still up there, but I think he died a while ago. And it was saying that governments are the biggest killers of their own people. And in the 20th century, the 1900s, governments killed, I think he said, 262 million of their own people outside of war. This is not about war at all. And so some of these beings, these amazing, unlimited people that we really are, played the parts of the victims, and some played the parts of those who killed them in those situations with the government annihilating its people. China has been the biggest perpetrator of that kind of thing, with over 100 million of their own people killed since the new regime got into power. And the people in different levels of the power structure, bureaucracies in the governments and corporations, they're collecting a paycheck to do these atrocities for the benefits of having a good job, and they're willing to enslave or kill basically their family members, which is all of us. And at the very top of the whole structure, the one that has got the world kind of under control right now, the people who run the show and organize the levels below them, they're not motivated by money at all. And I run into people constantly that think it's all money, and that money's the big evil, and money's the reason that people are doing all these terrible things. Well, money is used, and it's true, to motivate people at levels all through the power structure, but not the ones on top. They actually run the money system. They invented it. to control the people below them. You could say they're not money addicts, but they're drug addicts, but it's the drug of evil, and they're really lost in that addiction. Their plan is destruction, and they're after pain and extermination of life for its own sake. It's kind of like a ceremonial sacrifice of sorts being done systematically by the numbers to worship this dark power or god that they're serving, so that when everything is destroyed, which includes themselves, then they'll merge into the dark power that they're worshiping forever. And some of them actually express it in things they've written as merging with AI into some kind of cyberspace. So they really won't be needing their physical bodies anymore anyway. And if they did, they wouldn't be doing the kind of irrevocable damage to the biosphere that they're doing. They wouldn't be destroying the environment and all the species that they're making go extinct. And I know a lot of the people who identify themselves as conservative might think, I'm crazy because I should realize that all the environmental emergency stuff is nonsense. But it's not nonsense. It's now the global warming stuff and the climate change has been used as a giant fraud to make people give up their rights. That's clear. And it's really great that, some countries like the one I'm in didn't go along with the hoax of the Paris Climate Accord and things like that. They've already got clean and free energy sources for the last 100 years, which you can look at some of the work of Dr. Stephen Greer to give you the details of that. It's all being suppressed. And while they make believe that they are upset with humanity for using all the dirty energy sources, those are the ones they provide for specific reasons. They're the real environmental policy of governments, including the US and all the others that I know about, is not to clean up the environment. It's the opposite. So much is exactly the opposite of what it looks like. So anyway, that's the top level rulers don't plan to keep their physical bodies. That's why they're happy with destroying the world. And a lot of people can't understand that because, they think that they'd want to save the earth for themselves, but that's not their plan, to quote or paraphrase Obi-Wan Kenobi. So they've got the good part, I guess, is one of the good parts of it is they've got more than what they need technologically to kill us all right now overnight, but they're not doing that. That's not happening, and it's not that they're trying really hard and can't do it. They could do it in one night, but they're not taking that option. And this is important because it changes the time frame of what we've got to turn everything around. So it's what the destruction that they're doing is more like it's more systematic. It's like they have rules they have to follow, notices they have to give us at each step of the destruction, milestones they have to reach in certain ways. And if it weren't for those requirements that they were observing and following, we wouldn't have any time to fix things in the world and avoid the their goal of total destruction that they're creating. So the good part is we do have time, and because it's more like a ceremonial sacrifice of the earth and not just a, straight out extermination. It's systematic. That means we're living in the grace period right now, where if we become conscious of what we need to do, we could turn it all around. And when you really look at that, the main priority of the controllers is to make sure we don't use that time the way that we could, and we stay sick and unconscious and weak and fearful and really busy hating each other and thinking, oh, that guy or that lady is really crazy and we're right and they're wrong and we have to go fight, or that group over there is going to hell and we're the good guys. And if we stay busy with that level of energy and frequency and attention, then the people who are interested in destruction have no problem because we don't get in their way. So at every level of control in the power structure and the bad things they're doing, it looks like victims and oppressors, the good guys and the bad guys, but That's on the situation on the surface. And the real situation is that it's all victims of that fog that we wandered into, symbolically. So I think it might become clearer if we look at some examples of how that's working in the current world news. And one of the ones that's been in the top of the news lately, and should be actually, because it's very important developments, is happening in Hong Kong, and the people there are out by the millions in the streets, and it's a small country. I think it was 7.5 million people, something like that. And there's more than 1 million of them that have been literally filling the streets and bravely being out there in spite of the police presence and now the approaching Chinese military. And they're basically protesting a proposed law that would allow, it would allow the person who's in charge of the government in Taiwan, comparable to a president, but I think they call her a CEO, and she could decide on extraditing anybody that was requested by China, and her position is controlled by the Beijing government, so it's unlikely that she would have any objections whatsoever to anybody that they request to extradite. The reason that the Hong Kong people don't want to be extradited if they're accused of a crime is not for necessarily doing a crime, it's just for being accused. And they know in direct contact that the Chinese government is known for making people disappear and killing them and chopping up their bodies on the way back to where they're taking them and selling their organs, which is not very appealing for the people in Hong Kong. So they're out, and they're not just protesting against the proposed law to allow them to be hauled away to China. It's that they want, they're in a unique position because they used to be a British colony and then they got handed over by Britain, which turned out not to be very good for them. But it's like a transition period of 50 years, at the end of which they again belong to communist China. And that would be bad for all the people who live in Hong Kong now. They've got some limited freedoms, even with the questionable government that is over them right now. And they want more. They want government by themselves, what they're calling democracy. And they're, interestingly enough, waving American flags and singing the national anthem of the United States and saying, they were asked on the ground by some of these real journalists that I talked about, why are you doing that? Why, this is Hong Kong, not America. Why do you have all these American flags and singing American songs like the national anthem? And they're saying, well, because America represents freedom, and we want freedom. We want our own government. We want to govern ourselves, which is kind of funny because in America, I mean, not in a humorous way, but it's strange. In America, there are people protesting in the streets that they think America should be destroyed. There shouldn't be any America at all. Literally, they say that the borders should be not secured. They should be destroyed and let anybody just run in waves who wants to come in, including all kinds of criminals, and which they would all be criminals, of course, because it's illegal to just march into a country without going through the legal process. And there are people in America saying that that's how it should be. And the end of their chant goes, no USA at all. But in China, they like America and they want the freedom that image represents. But it's more than just the proposed law. It's that they have a list of demands leading up to their goal of democracy. And they don't like the figurehead CEO of their current government. They said she belongs to the Communist Chinese national government. She should be removed right away and to have self-rule, which is quite reasonable. So last I heard, in that situation, they're about to be invaded by Chinese troops whose mission is to crush all dissent completely, probably kill and injure whoever's necessary to do that, to get them out of the way. And many are expecting something like Tiananmen Square 2.0, which would not be good. A massacre, basically. So as long as the military of China and Hong Kong police are willing to kill their own people for a paycheck and a secure job, which is part of the theme we're talking about. The overwhelming force of the government firepower can keep the people as slaves or kill them if they all object. And if the soldiers and police just go on obeying what their orders are, then there's not much physical hope for the people in Hong Kong or anywhere else that they don't want to be destroyed. But if so if you thought about another possible scenario, it reminds me of when we were back in the school situation in the 60s that I told you about. And there was a saying going around that at that time when the students were discovering what was really behind the Vietnam War, not against the soldiers who were relatives and friends of mine and people that were great, but the big bosses, the deep state that we didn't know it was called that at the time, that was sending and controlling the soldiers in Vietnam. We found out what they were doing it for and all the oil company involvement and things like that. And we're protesting the Vietnam War and saying, what if they gave one of these wars, which is just to kill people of another country who are not the enemy, who are not a danger to America, and it was really for some corporate business? What if they gave a war like that and nobody showed up, nobody came? It's kind of like, when you think of what would happen if the soldiers and police that have the job of crushing the Hong Kong people, what if they said, that's not really a good idea. It's not ethical. It's not legal. Well, even if it's legal, it's not lawful. It's not what anybody should do. Those people are innocent and they want freedom, which everybody has a right to. And if they didn't do it, it would be very hard for the Chinese government or any other government like that to actually destroy people in some other place. A little bit like the Oath Keepers idea, but on a big scale. The Oath Keepers is a great organization founded by Stuart Rhodes, oathkeepers.org, I guess, if I remember right. Just look up Oath Keepers on DuckDuckGo. Don't use Google. And they want members to sign up, especially from the police and law enforcement and others like that, to say if there's an unconstitutional order given, like to disarm all the citizens in America or something like that, which would be a very bad idea, that the military and police who get that order won't follow it. They'll keep their oath, in other words. They're there to protect and serve the Constitution and the people of the country, and that should apply to people of every country. If there was some kind of a spirit that arose like that, then there would be hope that it wouldn't have to happen. But it's been happening for a long time. The situation with armies, conquering armies, massacring people in the countries they conquer is older than recorded history by far, and it hasn't slowed down. But now it's much more than just military forces doing the conquering. Now what used to be scattered tyrants who didn't even know about each other in different parts of the world, different warlords and people who are just trying to establish little kingdoms in different places, conquering and enslaving the people in their areas to live off them, like, I guess they saw them kind of like farm animals, right? Like that was their crop that they were raising, was the people that they could control and tax and kill if they want to and whatever. Now it's much more unified worldwide, and governments and corporations have merged together and become basically the same thing. And they have high-tech control systems to enforce their will on captive populations. China has really been leading the way in that as far as social control goes, with the help of Google and Apple and other tech giants, and developing facial recognition and this incredibly unified network of surveillance all over their people. I saw a story some weeks ago where it said they could find anybody in the country in 3 minutes, something like that, if they were in a city especially. So they're all excited about these new high-tech tools and toys that they've got and figure that, they've got it made and they'll be able to complete the agenda. And completing the agenda is not seen as the same by people in all levels of that structure. The ones down lower think that the agenda is just going to make them be the ones left in the elite remnant that get to enjoy the country, and everybody else will be out of the way in prison or killed. But the ones at the top know that all of these servants who are serving the darker agenda, they're all targeted for termination as well, like totally expendable. The ones at the top know that victory in the agenda means that everything is killed, and that means not just humans but nature as well. It's kind of beyond what normal humans can imagine, but that's actually what they're moving toward. And they've got the high-tech control systems now to enforce their will on the captive populations. And that's why, we called the title of the show today, use the word captives, or captors, I'm sorry. We're the captives and they're the captors, but I called them overconfident for a reason that we'll get to. In other words, this is not just saying everything's hopeless, we have nothing we can do, and it's going to go on like it always has or worse and destroy the planet. I'm not saying that. There's another option that is very powerful if we're allowed to get a hold of it and we manage to become conscious of it ourselves. And the confident captors, overconfident captors, are coordinated worldwide in kind of a unified network that we're not supposed to discover, and we're supposed to think all these countries are totally separate. The corporations are separate from the governments. The corporations are in competition with each other, so they're not in collusion. There's no such thing as a conspiracy, of course, unless you're talking about maybe bank robbers could have a conspiracy, but certainly nobody in the higher levels of corporations or government. But the reality is, the reason that we were taught that there can't be a conspiracy is because that's what there is, and we're not supposed to be aware of it or get in touch with what it is. It's much more unified and coherent than even most of the conspiracy students are studying. It's what John Kennedy called a monolithic conspiracy. In other words, completely integrated into one unit. JFK talked about that in a speech shortly before they killed him, and he was killed by that same conspiracy that he was warning everybody about, the same one that Dwight Eisenhower warned about when he was, I think it was in his farewell speech, that he was saying, beware of what he called the military-industrial complex, and that was basically taking power over everything. And Kennedy called it a monolithic conspiracy. And it's kind of ironic that it was Kennedy's death and the desire of the power structure to make it unpopular to think that there was more than one shooter that killed Kennedy, when obviously that was the case. So they invented the term conspiracy theory to make fun of anybody that thought more than one person shot John Kennedy, even though it was obviously true, from the entry angles of the bullets and directions they came from and things like that. And they just kept that term because it was so useful. And now anybody who gets too close to the truth is just labeled a conspiracy theorist, in other words, crazy. And that they've used that to knock people off the internet completely. But the conspiracy is the reality, and it's much more developed and complete than most of these conspiracy theorist people imagine. I know you can see that once you understand what's going on, like during the Ebola crisis in West Africa. I had a doctor friend who was very concerned about that, and she's a lady that's been on the Sunday show many times, Dr. Labo, and she found out that there was a paper put out by one of the military agencies that was probably accidentally declassified, and it was confirming that just in case this Ebola they were releasing from a laboratory in West Africa got out of hand, that it could be stopped at any time and completely wiped out by the use of something called nanosilver, which is like colloidal silver, but it's smaller particles. That's why they use the word nano. And the concentration that they used to wipe out Ebola completely was 10 parts per million, which is probably important. So she said, oh, I have 10 parts per million nanosilver. Why don't I just send some over to the people that need it in West Africa, where they've been saying that you should, to the governments of the affected countries, they were saying, you should try anything and everything. We have to stop this Ebola. This is a terrible crisis, and whatever you can figure out creatively to do about it would be really important. And then they said, well, okay, we'll accept this nanosilver from the doctor I knew who was in South America. And she sent it, and the World Health Organization gave orders that it should be intercepted. They communicated with Air France, which was the carrier. They said, put it in a warehouse, don't deliver it, make sure it never gets there, which they did. And the bank, one of the major big banks, took all the money from the doctor's nonprofit corporation so that she couldn't function. All these PayPal stopped serving her accounts. They all worked together in perfect cooperation or collusion to make sure that anything that was against the status quo, in other words, a real medical cure, would never be found out. So that was just a hint of the monolithic conspiracy that JFK talked about before he got killed. And a lot of others have talked about it too, and they mysteriously died right away, and almost all of them being called suicide, except, well, they couldn't call Kennedy suicide. That would have been a stretch even for the American audience at the time. But most of the others they did, or explained it on some other level. For example, Michael Jackson was just figuring out all about this conspiracy just before he was killed, and he gave a speech about it, which is still up on social media, and was planning a super comeback concert where he was going to say what he knew to the world. And he was killed right before that was supposed to happen. Actually, the concert was being rehearsed and everything, and he got killed in the middle of that, drugged to death, apparently. So this corporate network is really worldwide. It's following the steps of a specific protocol to destroy life on the earth, and they're actually creating the environmental disaster that they want us to be terrified of, and give up all our rights to save the earth so that we'll stop the environmental disaster, while some of the people who think they're conservative don't think there is one. There is one. It's just not the one that they're portraying, in the climate conferences and things like that. So the point of the environmental hoax is to make us give up our rights in fear, but it's kind of sophisticated, multi-level situation where they want to cover up the real environmental emergency that threatens to destroy life on the planet as well. Examples of it, you can see lots of examples of it. I've been involved in agriculture, actually in organic agriculture, since 1967, or no, before that. And before USDA coined the term and tried to take it over and make believe that they owned the word organic, which maybe they do now legally. But the quality of agriculture in not just America, but any country that you're in is really critical for the integrity of your ecosystem and the health of the people, to the bodies, our ability to have functioning brains and to live. I mean, you might have noticed this, but the brain is actually part of the body. So whatever blood and lymph and everything that you build out of eating the food you've got available is what supplies your brain and allows it to function or not, which the rulers would prefer not. Agriculture, though, as important as it is, has been completely captured. And instead of producing healthy food, though there is some organic, but the vast majority of it is poisoning the people and all life and the soil and the water and the air and everything like that. And that's one of the reasons I was really supportive of Organic Consumers Association. And we've had their founder and their chief attorney on our show on Sunday, because they were pointing out that what they call regenerative agriculture, their name for, I guess, beyond organic, where the soil and the environment get better every year as a result of what you do to it. I was super supportive. I still think they do great work on trying to transform agriculture and the environment in general to be not toxic to people and other life forms. And the only reason they're not back on the show, I think, and talking about this full steam ahead is that I questioned and criticized the Green New Deal because it's got horrible things in it. Single-payer health insurance, for example, that if you knew about the federal government and its partnership with the corporate companies that make big money off of treatments that are very bad for people, and agencies like CDC, which is basically a business partner of those agencies, you'd never want to give them even the control they have now over healthcare. That would be a very bad idea. And the Green New Deal wants to give it all to them with the idea that that makes free healthcare, so it must be wonderful. Also, the Green New Deal is insane as far as economics go, and it just says, spend the money, it doesn't have to exist. In other words, go into debt. And they don't see any danger in that at all. And they say, well, we did it in World War II, speaking of America, and there's this fallacy being taught in a lot of American schools and maybe other places that World War II really helped the economy. No, World War II was massive borrowing. It raised huge amounts of tax rates in the U.S. and other places, which were never recovered from, and it was something that didn't have to happen. It was all contrived through the bankers and other people. So the idea that agriculture is totally captured and has become a means of actually keeping people sick, getting poison into your bodies and all that, it's not a mistake. It's an orchestrated part of a much larger plan. So why do the farmers go along with it? I mean, farmers in general are pretty smart people, the ones that I've talked to. Very observant. You have to be smart to know what nature is doing and how to respond to it. But why do the farmers go along with this, making agriculture totally toxic? Especially when real organic farming produces more food and better food, maintains people's health, and makes farming a lot more pleasant and safe profession, and it earns more money. You can make much more money with organic products if you know how to fit into the distribution system. So partly, I guess, the reason they go along with the poison system is their education, in quotes, that toxic chemicals are somehow necessary for modern farming. And Justus von Liebig, one of the guys credited with creating the chemical agriculture industry, before he died, he said, "Oh, well, sorry about the chemical agriculture thing. I really blew it, and it's not good. It does produce food fast, and it weighs more, and you can get more weight to sell and all that, but the quality of it is terrible. And it's not just the poison sprays. It's also chemical fertilizers that kill the life in the soil, really disrupt this delicate ecosystem with the fungi and the bacteria and all the things that are meant there to give nutrition from the soil, like a bridge from the soil to the plant roots. The chemical fertilizers really mess that up, and they pollute the underground water that people drink, and then it makes them sick. It's just a bad situation. So fortunately, not all the farmers are believing their education that chemicals in agriculture are required and good, and some of them know better. But some of them know better and actually go into organic farming. Some of them know better and say, well, forget it. It's convenient to keep doing what we're doing. As long as it's profitable, I'll just get more and more land under chemical cultivation, and they keep producing poison food, which the government tells them is fine. Don't worry, you're a great, farmer, and this food is not poisoned. It's just advanced. So they may go along with that and stay in good standing with powerful forces in the chemical industry, which is one of the benefits, I guess, that they get out of it. And they get other kinds of rewards too, but they do it a lot like the Chinese soldiers did, who are willing to massacre the people of Hong Kong. It's a trade-off. It's not giving priority and adequate importance to the real things that matter, like Oath Keepers is talking about. There's an Oath Keepers needed all through corporate, not just America, but the corporate world in general, where the attitude too often is just, well, if you can make a profit, like the drug companies, for example, and the fines you have to pay for your crimes are less than the profit, then it's good business. And CEOs who do that get elected or appointed. It's a lot like the Chinese soldiers that are willing to maintain a good job and position that they've got by doing whatever they have to the people in Hong Kong. And they've got plausible deniability for any criminal activity on their side because the government made them do it. And they've got a lot of support and, good security and things like that. So the question is, why have we gotten so degenerated away from ethics? And if it's a good job and well supported, secure, etc., that who cares what it does to people? And you can see the same hypnotic mechanism working in modern medicine based on drugs, especially in the drug companies themselves that are in control. Where they're in control is most of the world right now, and doctors see the patients injured and killed by their drugs and treatments all the time. I've talked to many of them who acknowledge that, but they're still mostly controlled by this blind arrogance that they learned in their cult training, which is known as medical school. And I call it cult training because it has all the characteristics of cult training, like sleep deprivation, incredible peer pressure, massive amounts of data to memorize so that learning takes a backseat and you really don't have time to question much of anything. It's very hard, high pressure environment to get through. And most of the people that I've talked to that get through it have lost most of their common sense. And they've got this arrogant residue so that they're not really capable of looking at it to see where medicine needs to be supplanted by things that are a lot better. A better definition of medicine, you might say. And then there's also people within the medical community that are aware of the harm that they're doing, and they just keep doing it anyway. And they get a really good lifestyle money and protection within the system for being willing to do that. But I mentioned we had one of the high-level nurses on the Sunday show several times, and what she described, it was on one of the larger shows, and I wanted to have her go into more detail. And she said, yeah, with premature babies, they line them up to give them certain treatments that I can't mention on the show either, or will be banned right away. And they know that some of them will stop breathing. Some of them may die. They get radical high fevers, start screaming and things like that, lose cognitive ability, but that's just normal. You have to do this procedure to them anyway, because it's the standard of care and it's what all the insurance companies require. It's what the CDC says is normal. And that's going on every day. And there are these doctors who see the results of that and they do it anyway. And that's pretty unconscionable. So they get the lifestyle and the money and everything out of it. And then there are those very rare medical professionals, doctors and other people, nurses and therapists who question the whole drug paradigm, especially if they show something else much better, and they risk losing their license to practice, especially if they show that better alternative. And sometimes if they're saying too much and being too threatening, and the power structure evaluates that they could actually start waking up some other people to the issue, then they just get killed. And it's usually called suicide right away. That's a pretty serious situation, and it's going on now. And I just saw on Snopes today that none of it's true. Everything's fine. Don't worry about it. All these doctors didn't get killed for saying anything. It's a total coincidence what they were actually doing when they got killed. And I guess since Snopes said so, there's no point in worrying about it. But another example of the same thing, the intentional destruction of life on the planet is happening right now in the telecom industry. And this was brought to mind in my work schedule in the last couple of days. That I was talking to a representative from one of the big telecom companies, and he knew nothing about any harmful effects from wireless radiation, 5G, smart meters, Internet of Things, anything like that. But he was really interested. He was one of these great people that works for the company and wants to do good things for the customers, and just is not educated because he spent all his time in, I don't know, probably public school. And even the universities that get accredited, they can't tell the truth or they'd lose their accreditation. But on the Sunday show, we've had experts like Barry Trower, who was debriefing Soviet spies in England during World War II, expert in microwave weaponry. Mark Steele, who's actually designed some of those weapons. Paul McGavin, who's got a group called Scientists for Wired Technology, explaining why Wi-Fi and holding the phone against your head and things like that are a really bad idea. And a lot of people think just because you don't fall over right away and it doesn't kill you instantly, that it must be another stupid conspiracy theory and nothing to worry about. This is not an intelligent point of view. You need to do the research and find out for yourself. And Barry and others have explained how the frequencies chosen for the wireless communication damage the human body, but also they do all kinds of damage to the environment as well. Insects and honeybees and animals, even plants and trees are harmed by this kind of radiation. And Josh Del Sol has done some really good work on this with his several-year-old video right now called Take Back Your Power, which is a good one to get a hold of. I think it's before the concern of 5G was coming up, but it was very well done documentary, and you can see it for free. Not just the low-level employees, but most of the people who work for the telecom industry, even at higher levels, they don't have any idea of how harmful Wi-Fi is, and radio frequency and non-ionizing radiation, which is what they call that. They think that they're actually helping us by making things more convenient, giving us faster download speeds and all that. And by the way, with respect to faster download speeds, in America, most of the country already has fiber optic installed, according to the people I've talked to. And it may be true in other countries as well, and they just never mention it. Even though fiber optic cable is far faster, more reliable, you don't get kicked off your connection as much. It's just way better. It's harder to hack, and it's mainly incredibly safer for the human body to be around it. So definitely something to look into. And they think they're helping us. The people who work in the telecom companies, and they're mostly really good people, but they don't know about holding the cell phone to your head, which you should never do under any circumstances. And most people do that. They walk around in the street not seeing the outside world, just being busy talking on this phone, and they're carrying it constantly, and they end up, many of them, getting brain tumors on the site where they hold the phone all the time. So I recommend hands-free operation as much as possible, so you don't carry it in your pockets or in your bra or any place like that. It's a really bad idea. Most of the people working for the telecom companies don't have any idea. They don't know about the smart meter disadvantages or why Internet of Things is a really bad idea. The reason it's a bad idea is it's a gateway to AI enforcement of Total Agenda 21. And this would be a good thing to know about. There are several sites talking about it. Rosa Corey has some great videos online, especially one called Behind the Green Mask, which I think you'd find interesting. And just a lot of sources right now, but she's one of them for sure. People are warning about AI now too, which is connected to Internet of Things, but Elon Musk and other people like that are just selling out to it and figuring there's no way to stop it. Might as well go for a ride, even though it's the end of humanity. And the people at the very top do know that it's damaging to people and to life forms. And if you want any of the interesting details on how that's true, then you can go over to YouTube, for example, or any other platform that has the videos of Lost Arts Radio, and look up the series of interviews that Barry Trower did for us on Lost Arts Radio. They're super informative. People like that know it's a weapon against the population. And even though some are motivated to keep doing it for money, there's a lot of people doing really good work trying to alert the public and educate the public about why not just 5G, but all the wireless is really harmful to humans, and to start bringing this up in the companies where you work and getting it out of your house for sure. Just have a wired router, not using Wi-Fi. Be a really good idea. And again, the people high up in the corporation, the ones that know about what Wi-Fi and 5G and 4G and all these other Gs do to people, they're doing it because they have sold out, and they're doing it only to cause harm. And I think, from what I can tell, that they're pretty much beyond convincing by reason or debate or argument or anything like that. It makes more sense to use your time on people that want to know, and then you share information that would be appreciated by them. One more example of people knowingly doing things to go along with the rulers of destroying the world, and that's the central banking system. It's really critically important, because without getting rid of that the way it is functioning now, and fractional reserve banking in general, there's no economic plan from Democrats or Republicans or left or right or anything else that will ultimately work, because the federal government, the Federal Reserve in America and the analogous central banks in all the other countries are kind of perched on top of each country like a giant vulture, designed to transfer wealth away from the people who earned it to those who control the system. It keeps populations under control, financial stress, not realizing what's being done to them. And those in the higher levels of the banking system know exactly what it is, what it's for. They understand that it's being used to steal all the resources of countries, to control governments, to punish people who are seen as threats, to keep people struggling in the midst of all their rich countries. That every country I know of is super rich in some way, and when you convert the natural resources into usable form, then it's almost always enough to make all the people very well off, if not even more, in each country. So the agenda is to keep the people struggling in the midst of all those rich countries with all the resources, so they won't have the resources to resist or dissent effectively at all. And bankers at the upper and mid-level of the system, like Ronald Bernard, that we talked about a few months back, and others have explained what it's really all about and what they found out. And Ronald Bernard, who is out of touch right now, but may be back on the Sunday show soon, he said he confirmed that it's really satanic. That's where it comes from. That means destruction for its own sake, for causing pain and suffering, not to get money. So all the higher level players are confident. They believe thousands of years of preparations are about to be rewarded by finishing this sacrifice of the biosphere. And they're confident in their high-tech solutions and the censorship and the control that is being implemented right now. So their poisoning of humanity and the whole ecosystem is going well, and it's intensifying. 5G is rolling out and the Internet of Things coming out. Families, basic sanity, things like that they're trying to tear down. They don't care about warnings from scientists about any of those things. So what's the outlook for the U.S. considering all this, and what the plan is for ecocide and genocide? So obviously this is not partisan, because a lot of the Republican people in the U.S. and conservatives elsewhere that understand this would not recognize the legitimate environmental emergencies like 5G and like all the wireless and like chemical agriculture and even drug medicine is an environmental hazard. So we have an option that they can't match. We got to mention it before time runs out here, but only if we become aware of it, because it really looks like they've got all the bases covered as far as massive force and weapons that we haven't seen, and keeping us on dirty energy and refusing to clean up the environment, which they know how to do. But we have an option that they don't have under control if we are brave enough to use it. And I think it's the biggest secret or taboo that they're hiding among all of them. It's mentioned, only making it sound irrelevant, like something for the people who want to ignore the world, like some kind of new age cult. And what am I talking about there? Talking about the whole issue of consciousness, probably the biggest subject there is. It's the best kept secret, and we don't even really know what it is or what it can do. On a deep level, it's what created everything. It's before there was energy and light and all that, there was consciousness. So it's not some evil thing. It's not blasphemy. It's what's enlivening us now. It's who we are. It's the source that we came from. It's like physics or biology. It's not evil, but it's beyond those things. Everybody's got access, but not those who hold malice. So the world rulers, like the people getting ready to invade Hong Kong, know that they can't use this power against you because they have a lot of hatred and malice that they're not willing to let go of. And if you have that, you can't use this power. So that's why it's a vulnerable point, but it takes interchange to use it correctly. And that would expose what we really have available to us, because the power in consciousness, it's not a belief system, it's not some new age thing, it's real. And there are actually systems to get back our forgotten normal state of being able to use it, at which point the people in the power structure now, the ones who are after destruction, would be replaced by other ones that were a lot better. So if you happen to be interested in that, and our time's about up, check it out at planetaryhealingclub.com. We talk about it and actually work on it in a live, interactive, non-censoring platform every week. And in fact, that happens on Saturdays, and it meets for today in a half an hour, and that's the usual schedule. But if you're a member, you get access to the archives, and it goes to support the work that we're doing. So check it out if you want to, planetaryhealingclub.com. I think that's pretty much everything we wanted to tell you. We've got an interesting healer named Elaine Bouchard on the Sunday show tomorrow. which I think you'd find very interesting. I did. And Mark Steele, well, actually, Elaine was last week. I just misspoke. I'm sorry. Tomorrow is Mark Steele Part 2, and that's in response to questions about what's really behind 5G. He's one of the world experts in it, and you'd probably like it. And Elaine, it was a great show, but it's over. So take a look at the archives. Those are available free anytime. And remember, planetaryhealingclub.com. Remember to find us also on brighteon.com/channel/Lost Arts Radio. And I think you'll enjoy Mark Steele tomorrow night. So take care of yourself. Have a good rest of the weekend. Hope your week goes really well, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. And remember that even though things are very grim and pretty tight and not much wiggle room on the physical level in the world events right now, there's a loophole. And if you want to know more about the physical aspect of that, not as some new agey thing, but to actually use for everybody's benefit, including the ones we're trying to not be killed by, you're welcome to join us at planetaryhealingclub.com if you want to. We're live there every week, and we get into the detail that we can't really share on the public platforms without getting banned. So hopefully I'll see you there. For those interested, we meet in half an hour. And otherwise, I look forward to seeing you again next week, and be well until then.